Hello, my name is Himanshu Patel and welcome back. In this video, I am looking at the key people and events that pushed the civil rights movement forward. What mobilized African Americans to fight for civil rights in the 1950s? African Americans were mobilized to fight for civil rights in the 1950s because the gap between American ideals and their lived reality became impossible to ignore. Give Me Liberty explains that black veterans returned from World War II expecting democracy but instead faced segregation and violence, which pushed many to demand change. A. Philip Randolph added national pressure when he wrote to President Truman arguing that America could not claim to defend freedom abroad while denying it to black citizens at home. Thus helped lead to the desegregation of military 1948. Discuss events, people, court cases, reaction, and situations from state and federal perspectives. What pushed African Americans to fight for civil rights in the 1950s was a mix of injustice, courage, and powerful legal wins. Give Me Liberty shows how black veterans came home from World War II expecting dignity but instead faced segregation and violence, which pushed communities to organize. Faulkner, chapter 24-25. Lawyers like Thurgood Marshall challenged Jim Crow in court, leading to Brown versus Board of Education. And I read this line from National Archives: separate education facilities are inherently unequal. Southern states fought back with massive resistance, but the federal government stopped it during crises like the Little Rock Nine. Activities such as Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., and student organizers kept the pressure going, creating momentum that carried into the 1960s to 1970s with the Montgomery bus boycott. Freedom rights and major laws like the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and Voting Rights Act of 1965. Was there momentum from the 1950s into the 1960s to 1970s for more fights for equality? The push for civil rights didn't stop in the 1950s. It exploded into the 1960s and 1970s with new leaders, new laws, and massive public pressure. After victories like Brown versus Board, activities kept going. Students launched sits-in sweeping civil rights legislation since Reconstruction, showing how powerful the momentum had become. Leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., Dane Nash, John Lewis, and groups like SNCC and CORE pushed the federal government to act. If so, discuss more events, legislation, and people in politics who part of this momentum. Who was A. Philip Randolph? Who is Thurgood Marshall, a relevant figure of this era? A. Philip Randolph was one of the most influential civil rights and labor leaders of the 19th century. He organized the Brotherhood of Sleeping Cars Porters, the first major black labor union in the US, and used mass protest as a political weapon long before the 1960s. In the 1940s, he pressured Franklin D. Roosevelt to ban discrimination in defense industries and later pushed President Truman to. Why was Thurgood Marshall important? Thurgood Marshall was the legal powerhouse of the civil rights movement. As the lead attorney for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, he argued and won dozens of cases that attacked segregation directly. His most famous victory was Brown versus Board of Education 1954, where the Supreme Court ruled that separate education facilities are inherently unequal. The decision destroyed the legal foundation of Jim Crow and opened the door for school integration and later civil rights law. Ella Baker, a behind the scenes strategist who believed in the grassroots power, she helped create SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and trained young activists who led sit ins, freedom rides, and voter registration drivers. Maker pushed the idea that ordinary people, not just famous leaders, could transform the country. Bayard Rustin, the brilliant organizer behind the 1963 March on Washington. Rustin rarely gets credit because he was pushed out of the spotlight due to the being openly gay, but he was one of the most skilled and non-violence trainers.